I'd like to talk about how to change behavior, because that's a very important thing, where you're trying to change the behavior of yourself, change the behavior of an employee, which is really difficult to do. Well, one of the things you can do is look at like a sort of rat in a maze analogy. And if you're trying to train a rat in a maze, it's important that, one, the rat is hungry, otherwise he won't motivate the rat. Secondly, that the rat it's close enough that the rat won't give up. So if you're motivating a rat in a maze, what you want to do is give the food at the proper time. So let's say you have a rat going down a maze. Now, one of the problems is, as an employer, sometimes you do the reinforcement having nothing to do with the consequence, where there's no consequences between what you want and the reinforcement you're giving. So, for example, let's say you have a great day and you had a good weekend. You come home and then you come back to your work and you treat your employees great. You say they're doing a great job. You give them a lot of positive reinforcement, and they don't know why. On the other hand, you may have had a bad weekend, and you come out and you yell at them, and they don't know why. And it's consider a rat in a maze in the same thing. If you dumped food on the rat for no apparent reason, and then you starve the rat for no apparent reason, you had a very confused rat. And employees are the same way. So make sure when you're trying to get your employees to change behavior that you do something that's sort of close to what you want to do. Now let's talk about consequences. Now, if the first cigarette killed you, smoking would not be an issue. If the first time you had a banana split, you gained 5 pounds, that wouldn't be an issue. And if the first time you exercised, you lost 5 pounds, that would not be an issue. But the problem is there's usually too long a time between what you want to do and the change you want to make. So, for example, let's say you want your employees to show up on time because they're not showing up on time. Well, if they're late, you may chastise them or penalize them or take some of their pay away. But it has to happen over time. So lots of times you're trying to change that behavior, make sure that your reinforcement is appropriate and timed right. The closer the reinforcement is to the behavior, the better off it's going to work. Also make the donkey cart analogy. If you're trying to motivate a donkey to pull a cart, a couple of things need to happen. One is the donkey has to be hungry. If the donkey is not hungry, it's not going to work. So if you are going to give some reinforcement to your employee, for example, and you decide you're going to give them a steak dinner and they're vegetarian, that doesn't work. I also don't recommend money as reinforcement because money generally goes into that black hole called debt, and it really doesn't make any difference to the employee. I think gift cards are something where they actually get to experience something different or much better than things like money. So back to the donkey. So the donkey has to be hungry or he's not going to get motivated. He's got to want to do something. Now, if you're using carrots, hopefully the donkey likes carrots. Now, the carrot has to be close enough, because if the carrot's not close enough, the donkey won't even try. So if you're trying to reinforce behavior in an employee, remember the thing we talked about, time horizons, the employee has to feel that they can actually make it. So the reinforcement has to be close enough to motivate the donkey. The other thing, the load has to be light enough, because if the donkey starts to pull and it's too heavy, they're going to give up. So the donkey's got to be hungry, the load's got to be light enough, and the donkey has to feel that he can actually achieve the goal, and the donkey will move. And employees are the same way. So if you got an employee, and let's say you want an employee to, quote, work harder, whatever that means. You want to have more output. Well, the first thing you got to do is make sure that your motivation, like let's say, if we get this done, I remember one time when I was working with a site work company, and we were trying to get so much ground moved in a certain day. The most effective thing we did was literally draw a line in the sand. We took a can of paint, drew a big line in the sand, and said, if you guys can get the dirt moved to here, by 4 o'clock, everybody gets to go home, we'll have pizza. It worked great. So make sure when you're trying to motivate somebody that all those things exist. Now, another thing that's important in motivation is the how-to versus the why. Now, a lot of people feel that it's 50% how-to and 50% why. After doing many years of consulting, I believe it's about 90% why and 10% how-to. And the example would be, if you have enough reasons, you can accomplish almost anything. One way to look at it, the way you tell it between a training problem and a motivational problem, is if you put a gun to your head and you can do it, you have a motivational problem. Put a gun to your head and you can't do it, you have a training problem. So, for example, if I said, I want you to type 200 words a minute and you have 1 day to learn, you'd be dead. if it was the gun to your head issue. On the other hand, if I said, you need to make $100,000 this year or you're going to be dead, you'd do it. I don't know how you do it, but you'd figure out some way to do it. Now, unfortunately, most time people spend is spent on training as opposed to motivation. I remember a long time ago I took a course and he said, if you have enough reasons, you can pretty much accomplish anything. For example, if your kid's life depended on it or your life depends on it, you can do amazing things. But if it's just a good idea, the chances are you probably won't pull it off. So it's more important to come up with the reasons to do something than how to do something. So if you have, for example, let's say you want to double your business's revenue. Well, that's why things like vision boards work. If you have enough reasons to get it done, if your life depends on it, you could probably double your business if you wanted to. But the chances are you don't have enough reasons. So what you want to do is work on the reasons more than the how-to. Again, the why is much more important than the how-to. Now let's take that to your employees. Let's say you want your employees to get a report done by a certain date, or you want them to move so much dirt or get a house done or whatever you want to have them do. It's important that they have enough reasons to get it done. An example would be I had a lot of contractors that used to work on time and materials, so the longer they worked, the more they made. And they went from time and materials to do contracts, so the longer they worked, the less they made. We had to literally get rid of all the old employees and hire new employees because the old employees were at a cultural level or at a very belief level that it took as long as it took. So therefore, when you wanted to, frame a house, it took whatever it took. In the old days, the longer they took, the more money they made, and everybody was happy. Now, the longer they take, the less money they make, and it's really hard to change their behavior because they're not motivated by getting the thing done. So what you're going to do when you're trying to motivate your employees is say, especially when you're doing a contractor and you want to get the thing done, you got to let them know when it's supposed to be done by. You got to let them know the consequences of not getting it done by that date are we're going to lose money, the company may be at risk. You got to put enough reasons behind it. Otherwise, everybody sort of just shows up and puts in a day's work for a day's pay. And in this economy, that really isn't enough to make a business work. I like to talk about how important your thoughts are in controlling your behavior. I always say you go where you look, and that is also mentally as well as physically look. So one of the ways of viewing that would be the analogy of, see the paratrooper, parachuter. Let's say you're jumping out of a plane, you're going to parachute into a field. And you look into the field, it's a beautiful green field, it's a beautiful day, and you're parachuting down, and you love what you're doing, and the air's whisking past, you open the chute, you're there. And as you look down in the field, there's pretty much nothing in the field, but you do see this one spot where cows have been hanging out. There's a bunch of cow pies. Other than that, the whole field's really cool. But this one thing is all mushy and yucky and full of cow pies. So then you start. Your mind starts. Anything but the cow pie. Anything but the cow pie. Anything but the cow pie. It becomes almost a mantra. Well, your body's picking up on this, going cow pie, cow pie, cow pie. So pretty soon, all of your unconscious movements, the way you're controlling the chute and everything, you're starting looking at cow pie, cow pie, cow pie. And you'll start heading toward that thing. And the more intensely you want to avoid it, the more intensely you're going to go toward it. And the fear will keep showing up, cow pie, cow pie. And before you know it, boom, you're in the cow pie. Now, how does it work in business? Well, let's say you're in financial fear and you go anything but bankruptcy, anything but bankruptcy, anything but bankruptcy. Bankruptcy becomes your predominant thought. Chances are you'll be able to pull it off. It could be anything but being sued, anything but being sued, because fear is a very strong motivator. And your brain generally can't distinguish between a positive or negative. It just focuses on the word. So anything but bankruptcy, anything but that employee's going to sue me, anything but, oh my God, you won't get the job done on time, or they're not going to pay their bill. We have a lot of fears in business. And unfortunately, we focus on a lot of those fears. As we focus on the fears, we unconsciously head straight toward that fear. Now the question is, how do I avoid the cow pie? How do I avoid the bankruptcy? How do I avoid the fear? Because if I can say you can think about anything you want for the next 10 seconds, but don't think about red, go. Chances are your world is red. So the way you get around that is, instead of saying, I'm not going to think about bankruptcy, I'm not going to think about employee problems, I'm not going to think about divorce, you focus on something you do like. Like, look at that beautiful field of flowers. Look at those beautiful flowers. And you distract your mind from the negative to the positive. Or an employee is doing some behavior you don't like, instead of saying, oh, you're always late, you're a bad employee, you say, I really like the way you did that, door, or the way you did some finished carpentry there. So find something, catch them doing something right. Find something that looks good. So you distract your brain and your mind and your subconscious from focusing on the negative to focusing on a positive thing. It happens with employees. It happens with relationships. You have a client. Maybe the client from hell, so to speak. And you say, boy, this client's going to stiff me. I know it's really going to be bad. Well, the more you focus on that, the more the chance that client's going to do that, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you find yourself heading that direction for a client, think of the cow pie story and think, well, what's good about this client? What do I like about this client? And the chances are, if you focus on what you like, it's much more likely to happen than focusing stuff that you don't like about the client. So remember, focus on the positive mentally, spiritually, physically. It'll really help you get there.